Welcome to the Paleolithic. We're going to be looking at all of these things in relationship to Paleolithic art and understanding what their artwork maybe was about. All right, so about the year 40,000 BCE to about 9 to 8,000 BCE, that's before the year zero, or this is the time period we're talking about. Paleolithic means old or ancient stone, and it refers to the tools that man developed at this time. They were simply stone scrapers and spearheads and, weapons they threw at things. I mean, it was very, very rudimentary tool making. There was no farming at this time period. These men and women were simply fishermen, hunters, and gatherers. And so they were nomadic. They had to go where the food was. Here's sort of some of the areas we're going to be looking at shortly over the next couple lectures. There's Stonehenge in England on the upper left there. And there's the Willendorf. We're going to refer to the Willendorf area in the middle of, sort of in Germany there. Have a look at Çatalhöyük. That's over in Turkey on the left, lower left area. All of those places. This is where we are in Europe and the Middle East. Okay. Here's some early cave paintings. This is from the El Castillo cave in Spain, 37,000 years before the year zero. You see that mankind was basically stenciling around his hand, sort of saying, "I am here." They would have used a hollow tube or reed, and they would have blown pigment onto the cave walls over their hands to make that stencil. Okay, we're going to look at a tour of the Lascaux, France caves in France. And these are immense murals. Some are 400 feet long with thousands of animals in them. And they're deep inside the caves, not in areas that would be easily accessible for living. They weren't necessarily living with a lot of these images. So there's a lot of question as to what these images were made for. And they're all theoretical. Here's an image of a horse. You notice they're very simple in the drawing materials. We'll be talking about drawing materials in class, but charcoal, ochres from the earth, any sort of earth pigments that they could gather up off the ground. Sometimes even their own blood was used, water, mud, anything they could make a mark with was used, okay? Plant materials that were crushed were probably used. And remember, these are very rough and rocky surfaces that are not often easily accessible. They're hanging overhead, they're in weird places, they're behind stalagmites and stalactites. So this is a real tour de force. They really wanted these animals up on the wall. They have a very nice sense of movement, and the real spirit of the animal is captured in these, what you might consider simple illustrations. Here's an image. Later on, there's actually images of people that show up in these paintings. Here's one from the Chauvel cave in France. Notice how they sort of drew over animals one over the other. They're thinking that maybe probably original drawings were covered over with what were added to later by other artists as years passed by. Some of the theories behind these paintings and images are, one, that they are they're talking about a successful hunt. They're recording that. Or they could be simply honoring the animal that they survive on. Or, since in a lot of the early images, there were animals portrayed that they were never hunting, like rhinos and lions. But they may have been considered spirit or magical animals since they were so powerful. There's all kinds. Maybe they're hoping and praying for a better hunt in the future. Maybe they simply performed religious or cultural ceremonies with these images. The art historians have no clue. at all. Not definitely. But when you look at the Venus of Willendorf here, which is a very, actually, it looks large in this image, but it's only about 4 inches high. It's a small little figurine. There are a lot of these found around in caves and prehistoric dig sites. That this is not a real portrait of a real woman. This figurine would have been carried along as a magical type of thing, a token. Notice what is exaggerated physically in her. Her breasts, her belly, her wide hips. That's meant to emphasize that she is a magical fertility figure. Because in this time period, infant mortality and female mortality during birth and during early childhood was incredibly high, as you can well imagine. So to keep the clan and the tribe surviving, the family surviving, you needed to produce a lot of children. So women were especially important at this time period. I mean, for their childbearing gifts. This is a magical symbol and almost like a little magic spell or charm that they would have carried in hopes of a continued population growth. Okay. Notice the hair that's over her face. That she's not really meant to be a real woman. She's sort of women's fertility, that kind of a symbol. Animals show up in art during this time period. This is a small little votive figure of an elephant. And this mixture of this human body, sort of human-esque body, with the sort of feline or lion-like head, not shown very often, and they're not painted hardly ever at all. This is one that's what made this piece so unusual, because it is a blending of those two animals. And we're not sure if that's meant to be a magical thing. Probably is my guess. Carved into stone sites, like these two bisons, you'll find sculpture like this inside caves. You'll even find, like the Venus of Willendorf, little figurines of animals, like this bison here, that's actually got its tongue out, sort of licking away maybe scratching himself or licking away a piece of dirt or a fly or whatever. He's actually kind of grooming himself as he's being carved in. Very simply, but we get the idea and know what's going on.